My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 34 years old. The day my past tried to recognize me, I didn't panic. I didn't hesitate. I just needed a few seconds to remember who he used to be. I was standing in the lobby of a hotel in the town I grew up in, signing paperwork for a property acquisition, when a voice behind the front desk said my name. Not the name I use now. The name I buried 14 years ago. Evelyn Hayes? I looked up. It took me about 4 seconds. Not because he had changed, but because I had erased him so completely from my life that seeing his face felt like finding an old receipt from a place that no longer existed. Familiar, but meaningless. I said, "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" He flinched. Not subtly, not politely. His entire body reacted, like something inside him cracked all at once. "It's me," he said. "It's Daniel. Daniel Hayes. My ex-boyfriend. The man I had spent 3 years building a life with. Before he slept with my best friend in the house I was still paying rent on. And now, he was standing behind a hotel front desk. Name tag slightly crooked. Smile rehearsed. Life. Smaller than I remembered. I looked at him. He looked at me. And the thing he wasn't ready for wasn't my tailored coat, wasn't the assistant waiting behind me with documents, wasn't the multi-million-dollar deal I was closing upstairs. It was my face, because there was nothing on it. No anger, no bitterness, no satisfaction. Nothing. The same nothing I felt the night I left. The same nothing that made me pack a bag at 2 a.m. and drive until the version of me he knew no longer existed. I said, "Daniel, right? How are you?" How are you? The sentence you use for strangers, not for people who once knew your entire life. He heard it. I watched it land. The way hope drains from someone's face when they realize they don't matter anymore. I'm okay, he said. "You're back in town?" "Business," I replied. "Closing on a property." I didn't explain. I didn't elaborate. Because none of this had anything to do with him. He wasn't the reason I came back. He was just part of the background. Let me take you back 14 years. Because the story of how I left is the story of how I became someone he couldn't recognize anymore. I was 28, working as an HVAC installer, making $54,000 a year. Tired, but stable. Daniel and I had been together for 3 years. We weren't dramatic. We weren't toxic. We were quiet. The kind of relationship that looks solid from the outside, but feels like it's slowly dimming from the inside. We were trying for a baby. Year 2, nothing. Doctor said everything was fine. Just give it time. Time. The thing that stretches thin when you're waiting for something that never arrives. Daniel was frustrated. I was exhausted. And somewhere between those two things, we stopped talking the way we used to. My best friend's name was Lena Brooks. She had been in my life since college. The kind of friend you trust without thinking. The one who shows up without being asked. The one who knows your routines, your habits, your blind spots. She started coming over more often. At first, it felt normal. Helpful, even. She'd stop by during the week, bring lunch, sit with Daniel if I was working late. I thought she was supporting us, helping us stay connected, helping us get through something difficult. What she was actually doing was staying close to him. Inside my life, inside my home. On the days I worked 10-hour shifts and came back too tired to notice that things felt slightly off. The couch cushions, the guest towels, the silence when I walked in. I found out on a Wednesday, not through a confrontation, not through a confession, through something small, a receipt from a restaurant called Amaro's, a place downtown Daniel and I had never been to. $127. 2 entrees, 1 bottle of wine, dated the previous Saturday. A Saturday I worked a double shift, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. I got home at 9:30. Daniel was already in bed. He told me he had a quiet night, watched something, went to sleep early. Quiet night, $127. 2 entrees, a bottle of wine. I didn't confront him. I folded the receipt, put it in my wallet, and went to work the next day like nothing had happened. Because I needed to know everything. Not part of it, not enough to argue. Everything. The way you inspect a structure before deciding whether it can be saved or needs to be demolished completely. That night, while he was in the shower, I checked his phone. Not proud of it, but not sorry either. There were 243 messages between Daniel and Lena. 3 months worth. Texts, photos, plans. The language of 2 people who had built something inside the space that was supposed to belong to me. I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling, reading, processing, while the water ran 10 feet away. 243 messages. It took me 40 minutes. By message 200, I stopped feeling, not numb, empty. The kind of empty where your mind decides the pain is too large and files it away for later. He walked out of the bathroom, towel around his shoulders. Casual, normal. Hey, he said, you okay? You look tired. I locked my phone. Set it down. Long day, I said, going to sleep early. He smiled. Love you. I looked at him. Just for a second. Then I said, good night. That was the last conversation I ever had with Daniel Hayes, as the woman who loved him. I didn't sleep. I lay there, next to him, listening to his breathing, thinking about the messages, the jokes, the plans, the way my best friend sat at my kitchen table while building something with the man I thought I would marry. At 2 a.m., I opened my eyes and made a decision. I didn't move right away. I stayed there in the dark for another few minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of Daniel's breathing beside me, and thinking about how ordinary betrayal sounds when it's asleep. No thunder, no screaming, no shattered glass. Just the man who told me he loved me, breathing evenly, like his life had not split mine clean down the middle. I turned my head and looked at him. Really looked. The face I used to trust. The mouth that had kissed me goodbye that morning. The body I had been trying to build a future with. And all I could think was this. He already left me. He just forgot to mention it. That thought settled something in me. Not healed, not softened. Settled. At 2 a.m., I got out of bed quietly. The way I do everything when I have already made up my mind. I packed one bag. Clothes for a week. My laptop, my wallet, my father's watch. The receipt from Amaro's, still folded inside the leather slot like a tiny blade I refused to throw away yet. Then I walked through the house one last time. The kitchen, the living room, the couch where Lena used to sit, laughing too easily. The counter where Daniel dropped his keys every evening, like routine was proof of character. The hallway that had once felt like home and now felt staged, like I was walking through a set built to resemble my life. I stood in the doorway of the guest bathroom and stared at the towels. Clean now. Folded. But I couldn't stop imagining them damp in someone else's hands. That was the cruel part. Betrayal doesn't just break trust. It contaminates objects. It ruins furniture, changes the temperature of rooms, makes the entire house feel like it remembers something you didn't get to witness. I left my phone on the kitchen counter. Not to make a point, because I didn't want it to be found. A phone is a leash, a map, an invitation for people to reach into your grief and demand explanations. I didn't want calls. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want Daniel saying my name like he still had a right to it. Next to the phone, I left the key to the apartment. And a note. 4 words. I know about Lena. That was it. No rage, no accusation, no performance. Just truth. Short enough to fit in a hand. Sharp enough to cut for years. I took my bag, opened the front door, and stepped out into the dark. No one stopped me. No one saw me leave. That felt right, because the version of me that had stayed too long deserved at least one clean exit. I drove. No plan, no map, no destination. Just forward. Street lights gave way to highway signs. Highway signs gave way to long black stretches of road where the only sound was the engine, and the only witness was whatever part of me was still awake enough to understand this was really happening. For the first 2 hours, I felt everything. Rage so hot it made my hands ache on the steering wheel. Humiliation that sat in my chest like broken glass. Grief that moved strangely, not like tears, but like pressure, like my entire body was trying not to collapse inward. I kept seeing pieces of it. Lena reaching for a wine glass, Daniel smiling at a message I hadn't sent, my own house holding their secret while I worked double shifts and came home too tired to notice. I stopped once for gas around dawn. The cashier asked if I wanted a receipt. I almost laughed. No, I thought, I've got enough receipts. I said no, got back in the car, and kept driving. By the time I crossed the third state line, something in me had gone still. Not dead. Not cold. Precise. Pain had burned through its first wild shape and turned into decision. That mattered, because pain makes people do dramatic things. Decision makes people survive. Late that afternoon, I ended up in Reno, Nevada. I had never been there. Didn't know anyone there. Didn't have a reason to stop there except that I was too exhausted to keep driving, and the city looked like it belonged to nobody I had ever loved. That was enough. I checked into a motel that cost $48 a night. The carpet smelled faintly like bleach and old smoke. The bedspread had that stiff, overwashed texture cheap motels always have. The lamp by the bed flickered for a second before settling into a weak yellow glow. I set my bag down and sat on the edge of the mattress. Then, for the first time since finding the receipt, I let myself cry. Not loudly. Not theatrically. Just quietly. Head down, hands clasped. Tears falling onto my jeans while the motel air conditioner rattled like it was trying to drown me out. I cried for Daniel. For Lena. For the baby we had been trying to have inside a relationship that was already hollow. For the woman I had been 2 days earlier, still believing effort could save something that was already being replaced behind her back. And then I stood up, washed my face in the tiny sink, looked at myself in the mirror, and said the only honest thing I could say. "You're not going back." The woman in the mirror looked wrecked, but she nodded. Year 1 was ugly. There's no elegant version of reinvention. People like to tell stories about fresh starts as if they arrive with sunlight and symbolic music. They don't. They arrive tired, hungry, suspicious, alone. I got a job with a mechanical contractor doing commercial HVAC work. The pay was lower than what I had made before, but it was enough. Enough for rent on a studio apartment with thin walls and one small window. Enough for groceries if I stopped pretending coffee shops were necessary. Enough to keep me moving. I worked 60 hours a week, because work gave my mind edges, because exhaustion is easier to live with than memory, because if I stopped moving, I could still hear the shower running while I scrolled through 243 messages. So I didn't stop. I learned commercial refrigeration, industrial systems, the kind of work residential installers don't touch because it's harder, dirtier, and less forgiving. Work that required certifications, math, patience, and the ability to crawl into spaces that smelled like metal, dust, and ammonia for hours at a time without complaining. I earned 3 certifications in 11 months. Not because I was inspired, because obsession is grief with a job. My supervisor, a broad-shouldered man named Garrett, noticed me before he said anything. I could tell by the way he watched me in meetings, quietly, like he was trying to figure out whether I was ambitious or just angry. One evening after a site inspection, he leaned against the hood of his truck and said, "You work like a woman who's either trying to build something huge or outrun something ugly." I shut the van door and looked at him. "Maybe both," I said. He smiled once, not warm, not cold, just respectful. Fair enough. That was the first conversation I had in Reno that felt clean. No pity, no questions I didn't want, no false intimacy. Just recognition, the useful kind. By the end of year 1, I had almost no life outside of work. No close friends, no dating, no long phone calls. I rented silence and lived inside it, but something was changing. Very slowly, not in my heart, in my posture. The way I walked into rooms, the way I spoke in meetings, the way men twice my age stopped explaining basic systems to me once they realized I knew more than they did. Pain had done one thing for me I couldn't ignore. It burned hesitation out of my system. I was no longer afraid of disappointing people. That fear had been built for a woman who still believed loyalty guaranteed safety. That woman was gone. The woman who stayed knew how to read blueprints, negotiate timelines, and hold eye contact until the other person looked away first. The woman who stayed understood something I wish I had learned sooner. When a life collapses, it teaches you what was load-bearing. And for me, it turned out not to be Daniel. Not Lena. Not the apartment. Not the plans. Not even the future I thought I wanted. It was me. Just me. And once I understood that, the rebuilding became less sentimental, more strategic. A few weeks before the end of that first year, I got a letter forwarded through an old mailing address. No return note, no message. Just an envelope containing a photocopy of my own note. I know about Lena. Same handwriting, same slant, same 4 words. Daniel had kept a copy. I stared at it for a long time in my kitchen. Then I folded it once, opened a drawer, and put it away. Not because I missed him, because I finally understood something important. Silence had done what confrontation never could. It had forced him to live inside the sentence he earned. And me? It had forced me to become someone he would never be able to reach again. I turned off the kitchen light, went to bed, and set my alarm for 5:30 a.m. There was a job site waiting for me in the morning, and for the first time in a long time, that mattered more than the past. Year 2 didn't feel like a new beginning. It felt like continuation, which I learned is what real change looks like. No dramatic shift, no moment where everything suddenly makes sense. Just one day stacking on top of another until something solid forms underneath your feet. By the start of year 2, I wasn't just working. I was advancing. Garrett promoted me to lead installer on larger commercial projects, the kind with real budgets, real consequences, real timelines that didn't tolerate hesitation. $38 an hour. It wasn't just more money, it was recognition. The kind that doesn't come from sympathy, but from performance. One afternoon, after a site meeting for a data center cooling system, Garrett pulled me aside. "How would you feel about managing this one?" he asked. I looked at the plans, then at him. Managing or being responsible if it fails? He smirked slightly. "Both." I nodded once. "I'll take it." That project was worth $2.4 million. The largest one I had ever touched. I didn't celebrate getting it. I studied every night, every detail, every contingency. Because failure wasn't an option I allowed myself anymore. Failure meant stopping, and stopping meant remembering. We finished that project 3 weeks ahead of schedule, $180,000 under budget. Garrett didn't praise me in front of the team. He didn't need to. He handed me an envelope at the end of the final inspection. $12,000. Bonus. The first money I had ever earned that felt entirely mine. Not shared, not planned, not tied to someone else's expectations. Mine. I went home that night, sat at my small kitchen table, and stared at the check for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't done since before Daniel. I smiled. Not because of the money. Because I had built something that no one could take credit for. Year 4, Garrett offered me partnership. 30% equity in the company. $80,000. I had saved $62,000. He financed the rest. Not out of kindness. Out of confidence. And that mattered more. By then, the company was growing fast. Data centers, hospitals, industrial systems. Work that required precision and reliability. The same qualities I had learned to rebuild inside myself. Garrett handled sales. I handled operations. We didn't talk about personal lives. Didn't ask questions we didn't need answered. It was the cleanest professional relationship I had ever had. Defined. Respectful. Contained. I dated once. Year 5. His name was Adrian Cole. Architect. Calm. Thoughtful. The kind of man who noticed small things and remembered them. On our 3rd date, he asked about my past. Not casually. Carefully. Like he understood there was weight behind the question. I was in a long relationship, I said. It ended. He nodded. How? She chose someone else. I didn't elaborate. He waited. Then asked, do you miss her? I thought about that. Really thought. I miss the version of me that trusted someone completely, I said. I don't miss the person who broke that. He studied my face for a moment. Not judging. Understanding. That should have been enough. But it wasn't. Adrian and I lasted 8 months. No fights, no betrayal, no dramatic ending. Just a quiet realization. One evening, we were sitting on his balcony, the city lights stretching out below us, and he said something I still remember exactly. You're here, he said softly. You show up. You listen. You care. I looked at him. And? He hesitated. It feels like sitting next to a window that never opens. I didn't argue. Because he was right. I had rebuilt my life, but I had sealed parts of myself shut to do it, and I wasn't ready to open them yet. So I let him go. Cleanly. The way I had learned to do everything. Year 8, Garrett retired. Sold me his remaining 70%, $1.1 million. Financed over 5 years. I signed the papers in the same office where I had once stood as an employee trying to prove I belonged. Now the company was mine. Carter Mechanical Systems. I kept my last name. The one Daniel used to say like it belonged to him. The one Lena used to write in birthday cards. Now it belonged to something else entirely. Something I built. Revenue that year, $6.1 million. 34 employees. An office building I owned outright. And a house in the hills above Reno with windows that faced the mountains. Every morning, the light came in slow and steady. No surprises. No hidden messages. Just clarity. It was during that year that I finally handled something I had avoided for too long. The legal ending. For 8 years, I had never officially closed that chapter. No paperwork. No signatures. Just absence. My lawyer filed everything in Nevada. Daniel was served at the same address I had left. He still lived there. That didn't surprise me. Some people stay where things ended, as if proximity might undo the damage. He didn't contest anything. Didn't ask for anything. Signed. Quietly. Just like I had left. Within 60 days, it was done. Daniel Hayes became just Daniel, and I became legally, completely untethered. We were even. Not in pain. In distance. Year 10, I met someone different. His name was Ethan Cole. He wasn't like Adrian. He didn't try to understand me too quickly. Didn't ask questions that assumed I owed him answers. He was a structural engineer. Practical. Grounded. Patient. We met on a commercial project. He designed frameworks. I installed the systems that kept them running. We worked well together before we ever spoke about anything personal. That mattered because it meant the foundation wasn't built on attraction. It was built on competence, respect, consistency. On our 3rd date, he said something unexpected. I know there's a story, he said. Everyone has one. I waited. You can tell me when you want, he continued. Or never. I'm not going anywhere. That sentence did something small but significant. It removed pressure. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was being measured against my past. I told him on our 7th date, Everything. Daniel, Lena, the receipt, the messages, the note, the drive, the motel. He didn't interrupt, didn't react dramatically, just listened. When I finished, he leaned back slightly and said, "You didn't fight. You didn't stay. You just left." "Yes," he nodded slowly. "That's either the strongest thing I've ever heard or the scariest." "Probably both," I said. He smiled a little. "Are you still that person?" I looked at him, thought about it. "I'm the person who chooses better now." That answer didn't impress him. It satisfied him, and that difference mattered. We got married in year 12. Small ceremony. 20 people. No spectacle. No performance. Just intention. Two people choosing each other without illusion. Without expectation that love would fix anything. Because we didn't need fixing anymore. A year later, we had a daughter. Her name is June. She has his eyes, my stubbornness, and a laugh that feels like proof that something in the world can still be simple and real. The first time she recognized my face after I came home from a work trip, I felt something I hadn't felt in 14 years. Not relief, not happiness, something deeper, presence. By year 14, my life was stable in a way I didn't question anymore. Not perfect, not fragile, just built, which is why going back didn't scare me. Not really. My company was acquiring a commercial property in my hometown, $3.8 million. The seller insisted on an in-person closing. Old school. Handshakes, eye contact. I hadn't been back in 14 years. Hadn't driven through. Hadn't looked anything up. That place existed in a sealed part of my mind labeled before. And I didn't open sealed things unless I had to. But this was business. And business, unlike emotions, doesn't care what you've buried. So I flew back, rented a car, drove through streets that felt smaller than I remembered, past the house I used to live in. Different paint, different car, different life behind the same walls. That felt right, because nothing should stay the same after something breaks. I checked into the Ridgemont Hotel, 3-star, clean, efficient. The kind of place people pass through without attaching meaning to. The lobby was quiet. The front desk was straight ahead, and behind it, Daniel. It took me 4 seconds to recognize him, not because he looked different, because I had removed him so completely from my mental landscape that my brain needed time to retrieve something it no longer used. He recognized me instantly. Of course he did. I was the person he never stopped remembering. That's the difference between the one who leaves and the one who gets left behind. And just like that, the past stood in front of me. Not powerful, not overwhelming, just there, waiting to see if it still mattered. He said my name like it still belonged to him. Soft, careful, almost afraid it might break if he said it too loudly. "Evelyn, can we talk after my shift?" I checked my watch. 6 p.m. was an hour before my dinner meeting. An hour I didn't need. A conversation I didn't owe. I could have said no. Probably should have. But I looked at him, really looked this time, and realized something I hadn't expected. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. Not of what he would say, not of what I might feel, because there was nothing left in me for him to touch. "I have a meeting at 7, I said. "I can give you 15 minutes. 15 minutes. That was all he got from 14 years. He nodded too quickly. "Okay, thank you." Bam. At exactly 6 p.m., I was already seated in the hotel restaurant. Corner booth. Back straight. Coffee in front of me. Black. No sugar. Some things don't change. He walked in a minute later. Changed out of his uniform. Blue sweater. Slightly wrinkled. He looked older. Not in a dramatic way. In a gradual one. Like time hadn't been kind, but it also hadn't been cruel enough to erase him. Just worn. He sat across from me, hands clasped together like he needed something to hold on to. "You look," he started, then stopped. I waited. "The same," he said finally, "but different." "I am different," I said. Silence stretched between us. He broke it. "I've been waiting 14 years to say something." I took a sip of coffee. "Okay." He swallowed. "I'm sorry," he said, "for Lena, for everything, for the lying, for the 3 months, for that Saturday at Amaro's, when you were working and I was..." His voice faltered. He tried again. "I was the worst version of myself," he said quietly. "She was easy. You were real. And I didn't know how to handle that. We were trying for a baby, and it wasn't working, and I felt like I was failing you and failing us, and Lena made everything feel lighter." He looked at me, searching for something. Understanding. Anger. Anything. "That's not an excuse," he added quickly. "It's just what happened." "I know what happened," I said. His breath caught. "I read 243 messages." That landed. He nodded slowly, eyes dropping to the table. "I figured," he said. "The note, 4 words. I know about Lena. I've read it every day since you left." I tilted my head slightly. "Every day?" "It's in my nightstand," he said. Same paper, same handwriting, the ink starting to fade. I watched him for a moment. 14 years. And he was still living inside a sentence I wrote in under 10 seconds. I'm sorry the silence was hard, I said. His head snapped up. Hard? He repeated. You disappeared. No phone, no email, nothing. I didn't know if you were alive. I went to the police, filed a missing person report. They tracked your car to Nevada months later, but by then, he shook his head. You were gone. I let that sit. Then I said calmly, I became someone you couldn't find. The moment you chose someone else. He looked like that hurt. It probably did, but it wasn't cruelty. It was accuracy. Evelyn, he said, voice quieter now. I need to know something. I didn't respond. Did it hurt? He asked. When you left, when you drove away, when you sat wherever you ended up, did it hurt? I held his gaze for a long second. Then I answered, yes. He exhaled sharply, like he had been holding that breath for 14 years. For about 14 hours, I continued. His expression shifted. Confusion. Disbelief? I felt everything, I said. Rage, grief, betrayal, the kind of loneliness that comes from realizing the two people closest to you were the two people furthest away. I paused. Then I stopped. He stared at me. You stopped? He echoed. I stopped feeling about you, I clarified. Not in general, not permanently, just about you. That's not normal, he said quietly. Neither is betrayal, I replied. That ended that line of argument. He sat back slightly, studying me like he was trying to find the version of me he remembered. She stayed, he said after a moment. Lena. I didn't react. For a while, he added. 6 months after you left, she couldn't handle it. The guilt, the fallout. She moved away. I haven't heard from her since. I nodded once. So she left too. He laughed once. Short, hollow. Everyone did, he said. You, Lena, friends who took sides. Even my parents. They stopped talking to me for a while. Said I threw away something real for something temporary. That must have been hard, I said. He looked at me sharply. That's it? He asked. That's all you have? What do you want me to say? I asked. I want you to say you felt something, he said. That I mattered. That we mattered. I leaned back slightly, considering him. Then I said the truth. You mattered, I said, until you didn't. That landed harder than anything else, because it wasn't dramatic. It was final. I built a company, I continued. 6.1 million in revenue last year. He blinked. I got married, I added. My husband's name is Ethan. A flicker of something crossed his face. I have a daughter, I said. She's 18 months old. Her name is June. His eyes dropped. I didn't stop. She laughs at everything. She has her father's eyes. And she's the reason I know leaving you was the best decision I ever made. He looked up slowly. Not angry. Not defensive. Just broken in a quiet way. Not because you were terrible, I added. Because you were a closed door, and I spent 3 years trying to open it with the wrong key. I let that settle. Lena wasn't the reason I left, I said. She was the confirmation. Tears slid down his face. Not dramatic. Just steady. Like something inside him had finally stopped pretending. Are you happy? He asked after a while. I thought about it. Carefully. I'm present, I said. He frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means I'm not living in what was, I said. Or what could have been. I'm living in what is, and what is good. He nodded slowly. I've been waiting for you, he admitted, all this time, thinking maybe one day you'd come back. I shook my head gently. I didn't come back for you, I said. I came back for a property on Gibson Road. You just happened to be standing behind a desk. That hit hard, because it erased 14 years of hope in a single sentence. I don't know how to stop waiting, he said quietly. You find something that isn't waiting for you, I said, the same way I did. I reached into my bag, pulled out cash, and placed it on the table. $8 for the coffee. I stood. He stood too. Evelyn, he said. I paused. Yes? The note, he said. I know about Lena. I've read it every day. I looked at him. Then it's time to stop, I said. I can't, he whispered. You can, I replied. It's just paper. I held his gaze one last time. The same way you were just a chapter, I added. And Lena was just a mistake, and that life was just something I outgrew. He didn't respond, didn't argue, because somewhere inside him, he knew it was true. I walked out of the restaurant, through the lobby, past the front desk where he had said my name like it still mattered, through the revolving doors, into the evening air. The meeting went exactly as expected. Handshakes, signatures, $3.8 million. Done. No emotion, just execution. The next morning I flew home. Ethan picked me up at the airport. June was in the back seat. The moment she saw me, she let out a loud, excited scream. The good kind. The kind that means she remembered me. That I mattered. Now. Not 14 years ago. Now. Ethan smiled. How was the trip? He asked. Close the deal, I said. He glanced at me. Anything else? I buckled my seatbelt. I saw Daniel, I said. He waited. Are you okay? He asked. I looked out the window. The mountains coming into view. I'm great, I said. He studied me for a second. Did it bring anything up? I shook my head slightly. He asked me if I was happy, I said. Ethan smiled softly. What did you say? I told him I'm present. He nodded. That's better than happy. I looked at him. That's what I told him. We drove home. June fell asleep halfway there. The house came into view. Lights on. Door open. Waiting. Not locked. Never locked. And I realized something as I stepped inside. I never once thought about going back. Not for closure. Not for answers. Not even for revenge. Because the opposite of love isn't hate. It's absence. And I had mastered that 14 years ago.